You're live.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Free Assange Vigil. We are incredibly in our 70th consecutive week of doing these. My name is Steve Boykinen. I'm joined this evening by my co-hosts Andrew Smith and Misty Winston. We are also joined this evening by Misty's co-host, Jesse Zurawell from Facts on the Ground. Really looking forward to this conversation. I've never had an unenjoyable moment with this lad. So before we get to that, however, let me run through the numbers. Today marks 3,619 days of illegal and arbitrary detention for Julian Assange. 573 days since the WikiLeaks founder was trafficked from the Ecuadorian embassy after being sold to the United Kingdom for a $4.2 billion IMF loan. 64 days remain until District Judge Vanessa Bareitzer, concierge of the U.S. State Department, reads her decision. That will take place on January 4th, 2021. Today marks 1,243 days of incarceration for Reality Winner. And on the plus side, today marks 230 days of freedom for Chelsea Manning. And Chelsea streams on Twitch Thursday through Sunday from 7 to 11 p.m. Eastern. With that, I will turn it over to my co-hosts. Fight to see who talks first.
It's going to be me. I win.
Well, let me just say before we start, thank you for having me.
We haven't even introduced you yet, man. It's not your turn.
Jesse, shut up. Hush.
Yo, man.
Anyways, so since I win, I get to introduce Jesse. So everybody, welcome to the Vigil for the first time, which is weird. My co-host from my other show, Facts on the Ground, Jesse Zurawell. Jesse, thanks, man, for being here.
Thank you all for having me on. It's I'm going to say an honor because I know a lot of really excellent guests have been on this show. So it's really nice to be able to contribute to the conversation that they've been putting forth on here. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Andrew, you may have a turn now, sir.
Thank you very much for joining us, Jesse. It's an honor to meet you.
Thank you.
So in Julian's week of hearings, there was tons of testimony. The U.S. made a lot of crazy arguments in court, a lot of weird legal assumptions and all that kind of stuff. So I just wanted to get just overall, like, your opinion of what happened in court through those 4 weeks.
Well, to me, it seems like the prosecution, which is mostly American, but it's an American Anglo axis of sorts that's trying to destroy Julian Assange's life. I think they're grasping at straws at this point, and I think they have been from the beginning. I think they started with what you could say was their strongest argument, and it really wasn't much of an argument at all. This assertion that Julian willingly and knowingly published information that would harm U.S. and other Western assets abroad. And from there, it's just deteriorated in the coverage I followed. But despite that, I don't think the judge, Vanessa Barrister, I believe is her name, correct?
Bareitzer? I think
Bareitzer. Yeah, I don't think that she is a good faith actor, and I don't think that she's acting objectively. I think she is under some sort of pressure or mandate from either the UK or the US or both to either keep Assange in Belmarsh until he dies or to have him extradited and charged under this absurd law. So that's basically what I make of it. It's not anybody who looks at it, who even looks at a picture of just Julian sitting in the glass cage in the back of the court, unable to hear, unable to participate in his own hearings. It's a bald-faced kabuki theater of a hearing, and I don't know what's going to happen. I think there's only one of two options. Obviously, he stays in Belmarsh and he dies. They grind him into the ground, or they extradite him here, and he gets tried in the heart of NatSec country in Virginia, and he ends up in prison for the rest of his life. So, not the most optimistic outlook or analysis, but I think that's what's happening.
I mean, I think that's a fair assessment. We've talked about that here. I mean, the position in which he finds himself is, it's kind of hard to find positives because he is up against the greatest superpower on earth and all their friends. So, I mean, yeah, it's kind of a doom and gloom situation. That doesn't mean, I mean, it's not still worth fighting for. It's what we're doing here. But yeah, I definitely think that that's probably a fair way to look at it, as sad as that is.
Yeah, and here's the thing: if Joe Biden and the Democrats are successful in stealing this election, it changes Julian's situation zero, absolutely zero. In fact, you could have, in an appeals process, could have really hammered home the political nature of this prosecution. The upshot, I suppose, is that you can do the same with Joe Biden, and there's more history of a politically motivated persecution of Julian Assange on the part of Joe Biden, not by much, but by a couple of years. And that's where it's all going to be made or broken, is in the narrowing window of time, according to Stella Morris, at any rate, that an actual appeals case will happen. We had originally thought anywhere from like 2 to 5 years, and Stella, the way that she was talking about a couple of weeks ago, made it sound like it may be April or May. So that's an accelerated timetable. It means we have a lot of work to do. It means everybody that's watching right now, please help us with that work. We're going back to Washington, D.C. for the 4th to hold an event when she reads out her decision, which historically will be pre-written on a laptop when she shows up. And it's not like they're allowing for deliberation or orally delivered closing arguments. Those, we did get an extension by a week. The defense did. They were granted a 1-week extension on their deadline for submission of closing arguments. Now, does that mean the whole thing gets pushed back to another week? And now instead of the 16th of November, it'll be the 23rd or 22nd before closing arguments are done? Do they still have I'm sure they still have 72 hours to respond to what the prosecution does. But I don't know. We should look into that, maybe.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. I had never really thought of that before.
Just going back to Biden real quick, I think it's worth pointing out that Biden and Mitch McConnell, whether wittingly or not, have used the same exact term to describe Julian Assange, which is a high-tech terrorist.
It was in a matter of days of each other. That was a talking point. That was. I guarantee you they weren't the only senators who used that phrase. It's just we've seen the video of it. I bet if we went and did some digging, there were probably a number of senators on both sides of the aisle that expressed an identical sentiment, because this is a bipartisan war against the truth. It's a bipartisan war against free speech. It's a direct attack, not just on the First Amendment, but on global press freedom. And we don't have millions of people in the streets over this. That boggles my fucking mind, man.
And that's what it's going to take too. Like you said, it doesn't really matter if it's Trump or if it's Biden. That really doesn't make a difference. It's going to take a massive movement of people to force their hand. That's the only way we stop this. It really is, I think, at this point.
And of course, the UK is back on lockdown.
Yeah. I mean, it's all very conveniently timed. But I don't know how to combat that aspect of it. But I mean, even just getting people to talk about it more would be excellent. I mean, now that we have the Mueller report, the unredacted Mueller report that came out, and there's more evidence that WikiLeaks didn't coordinate with Russia. I mean, at some point, it's got to be safe enough for somebody to speak out. Bernie Sanders, AOC. I mean, there's enough wiggle room for you to hide behind. You can hide behind Obama. I mean, shit, hide behind Orange Man Bad. Trump's the one that's prosecuting him. So use that as your excuse to speak out against it. I mean, you hate everything he does except for this. That doesn't seem suspect at all.
Well, and war and domestic surveillance and the single largest upward transfer of wealth in recorded human history, and right after the last single largest transfer of upward wealth in recorded human history. Like
we're on a roll. And
people are like, but it's gonna be better with Joe Biden's in office. No, dude. First of all, Joe Biden's never making it to office. Never.
You don't think?
No, he doesn't see Inauguration Day.
A lot of people are saying they're going to try to get him to last to 2 years in one day, because then Kamala Harris, because if she doesn't serve more than 2 years, then she can run for 2 consecutive terms. So she could technically be president for 10 years.
The golden age is coming.
That's horrifying.
I've tried to explain to a number of people that I just bump into in my community that 8 years of Kamala Harris is significantly more frightening than 4 more years of Donald Trump, and they can't wrap their heads around.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's so true though. Yeah,
because they're so locked into Orange Man Bad. I'm like, what? Okay, so what is Donald Trump? Show me on the doll where Donald Trump hurt you, and it's all optics, largely, for a lot of these people. Now there are people that have Latin American relatives that I know a couple of people that have had a relative deported, and they're like, fuck Trump and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, dude, it was his turn. I hate the fact that it sounds like I'm defending Donald Trump right now. That guy is a just scumbag war criminal.
Douche canoe.
Yeah, dude. He stiffs his contractors, and I'm a goddamn carpenter, Like that alone, I was never gonna vote for him. But dude, Kamala Harris is a dead-eyed, soulless servant to power and nothing more. Nothing more.
And I think that's almost completely exemplified in her recent 60 Minutes interview, which Jimmy Dore broke down and deconstructed very well. And she's essentially laughing at nothing, and her filler, she's so devoid of a vocabulary or a vision or any kind of intellectualism that she has to literally giggle to fill.
Okay, so can we talk about the giggle for 1 second? We need to talk about it, because this is like a thing. It's called duping delight, and it's when you're lying to people, you can't help but laugh or smile, because when you're a psychopath, you get off on that. You think that you're fooling people, and that makes you like happy, and you can't help yourself. And so that is what that is. Like, she is seriously empty vessel, pure psychopath. Like, she's terrifying.
Did you call it duping the light?
It's called duping delight, and that means like you're getting
delight.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it makes you happy to dupe somebody else, and that's what that's called. It's like a real thing, and it's super creepy. Like, her little giggle weirds me out. I can't handle it. I honestly, it's like worse than a horror movie. And I love horror movies. Don't get scared very easily. She freaks me the fuck out.
I mean, look, there's on the one hand, never give a sucker an even break, right? But on the other hand, like, there's Kamala Harris, who just, the hyena laugh, really? Duping delight. That's interesting. I learned something today, Misty. Thank you. No, the amount of expansion we would see in dissident roundups, in surveillance, in escalation of both hot and cold wars, it would be the unprecedented last dying gasp of an empire that is in full scale collapse.
Well, I think that's what we're already seeing. And if you look at Kamala Harris objectively, or without your emotional preferences, it's very easy to see that she's a complete servant of the carceral state. I don't know what foreign policy experience she has, if any. I can't imagine her, let alone Joe Biden, on the world stage talking diplomatically to somebody like Putin or...
Can you imagine?
Forget about Maduro.
Joey B. Like, they shoot him full of as many dementia and Alzheimer drugs as possible. Give him a little bit of blow just for that extra oomph.
Yeah,
it's fucking like, all right, Joey, get out there, go talk to Vlad, and he'd be like, let's arm wrestle, motherfucker.
These are two people who have been career state servants, and they're trying to pull the wool over our eyes. Like, when they get in office, they're going to somehow be our saviors or our leaders to a prosperous freedom, to a beacon on the hill. Like any of us wants to go back to Puritanism, right? So
I'm a pass on that.
I think that, as Chris Hedges has analyzed this so thoroughly, these are the symptoms of an empire in collapse. This is what we get. We get not only two candidates who are farcical at best, but we get an election where, look, it's the day after the election, and there's really still no conclusion yet on who's the next American president. Not like it's going to make a difference, but I think that makes the case even stronger. We have two candidates who are essentially the same, although they go under different party names, but the country is in such a paroxysm that it can't even decide between two candidates that are the same. It's this sort of psychotic.
Well, that's the thing, Jesse. If Trump was the monster that some news networks portray him as, Joe Biden should have ran away with this.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Hillary Clinton should have ran away with this.
Mm-hmm.
If he was comparably as bad as they say he is, and a lot of that could be true. I don't know. It could be, there's a bunch of stuff we know isn't, like Russiagate. And the thing that they impeached him for, by the way.
Well, the House.
If you go on the Googles and you type in Pied Piper WikiLeaks email, you realize that the DNC created the thing that they can't beat, which is like the whole irony behind this whole thing is that WikiLeaks in 2016 blew the curtain apart even for the 2020 election, where by the DNC's own internal strategy emails that they had picked Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, and Donald Trump as the three potential Pied Piper candidates. The right-wingers they would elevate in left-wing media to create the straw man punching bag that anyone could beat. And out of that list, they picked Donald Trump. And they still can't beat him. And it's just fucking hilarious. Like, as sad as it is that this is the world we live in, the fact that they can try to create this theater and then can't beat the own artificial creation that they made is just, it's brilliant and hilarious.
Well, and Trump said it himself the other day in a speech. He said, you know, if Joe Biden and Barack Obama had done a good job, I wouldn't be here right now. And he's absolutely fucking right. He is absolutely right. That might hurt your feelings that he's telling the truth there, but he's telling the truth there.
And it's the truth from the perspective I gave, and then the Jimmy Dore angle that like Obama was just that bad.
Well, that's what a lot of people who voted for Trump said. I mean, it was a wholesale rejection of everything smooth, pre-packaged, and neoliberal. And yeah, they got a lot of neoliberal policies out of Trump. They have. They've gotten a ton of them, man. Because Donald Trump's kind of a fucking neoliberal. He always has been.
Yeah.
But
listen, if he was an existential threat, why are they helping him pass everything he wants? I mean, everything he wants. They're giving him more money for defense spending. They're giving him greater spying powers. They gave him the CARES Act. They gave him, I mean, how many things do they have? How many judges, federal judges? It's like 200 and some across the country, federal judges.
It makes it 205 or 6.
Yeah. I mean, come on. If he's that much of a threat, then why the fuck are they helping him so much? Come on. Like, people have to start seeing through this. They are not opposed to him. He is not a threat to them. He's rolling with the same agenda that Joe Biden would roll with. It's the exact same thing. It's just different packaging. That's all it is.
Although I can't picture Biden making a move such as trying to establish some sort of peace with North Korea. I think Biden would just toe the line on that.
You know, he was so jealous when they named the Golan Heights after Trump. Like, those should have been Joey B's Heights.
That's another topic to talk about, which I think it's a policy, a geopolitical policy for which we should take Trump to task heavily because it's illegal under international law. It has to do with the continued occupation of Arab lands by illegal Jewish colonies. And it just gets mentioned once or twice and then it's swept away and it's back to whatever was the in vogue story at the time for mainstream media. But the Golan Heights were occupied by Israel illegally in 1973.
Yeah.
And remained so until they were officially annexed and renamed Trump Heights. And
officially annexed was Benjamin Netanyahu standing in front of a whiteboard that showed where the annexation was going to be. And he's like, we're doing this now.
Right. And that should be an international scandal, particularly if journalists care about international law and humanitarian law and history and have even a modicum of empathy. But it's a non-story. Just
that's
like
because journalists don't have those things, Jesse. Mainstream media journalists don't have those things. They don't care.
I know. And it's the same situation with the unilateral move of the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem in Israel. It was a 1 or 2 day story, millions of dollars, our taxpayer dollars spent on it. And that too is illegal under international law. And, nobody bats an eye. Nothing gets said about it. Instead, it's, at that time, it was still, I think, nearing the apogee, or maybe it was at the apex of Russiagate, but that's all anybody wanted to pay attention to. They so desperately wanted to compromise on Trump. They wanted to see the P tape. Never mind that he's flouting international law, not just in those 2 ways, but in lots of other ways.
Just in general, like a rent boy for Zionists worldwide.
Yeah. And I can't confirm it, but if you look at the evidence, what's been written, what's been reported on, Sheldon Adelson is basically the big man pulling the strings and whispering in Trump's ear. And there's also a connection there between Sheldon Adelson and UC Global, which was the CIA hired mercenary spying firm, which spied on Julian Assange and even spied on him while he was meeting with his attorneys, which that alone should get his case thrown out. But yeah, Sheldon Adelson is definitely behind Trump. I don't know how much he pulls the strings. I don't know how much he has Trump's ear, but I think it's a lot. And that's why you see these hyper Zionist moves, and also just complete violations of client privilege attorney, like what we saw with UC Global and Julian Assange. So
that case is so incredible.
Yeah.
Every aspect of that case, it's okay. So in the first place, they had an existing contract with the government of Ecuador, right? Mm-hmm. And as soon as the U.S. interferes in the free and fair elections of the Ecuadorian people, and a puppet president is installed, this same company that already has an ongoing contract with a fucking government gets a second contract to go to work for another government inside the government of the government they have a contract for.
Yeah, and we should be clear that Mike Pompeo was just as much behind this as Sheldon Adelson was, if not more.
Steve, I feel like you need one of those boards with the strings so you can like
hold up, man. I'm gonna go background hunting real quick.
You gotta get a true detective background up there.
Yeah.
Are you looking for that image, Steve?
The crazy image with the guy?
Yeah, I've got it somewhere.
Yeah. Cracks me up.
He looks all coked
But yeah,
out.
I mean, when you have somebody hired by the CIA spying on you and your lawyers, and then the United States wants to prosecute you under their laws, that should be a bigger story. That should be a problem. That should be, I mean, the fact that isn't like, okay, case thrown out, end of story, sorry, we fucked up, you know, you're free to go. That's crazy. Like it, and it, you know, I'm going to start to ramble about it because it pisses me off. Nobody cares about this fucking shit. Nobody cares. It's like, this is a complete shit show of, it's a human rights violation extravaganza. It's like, how many human rights can we break in this one case? And, you know, nobody gives a shit. What happened?
It's not looking great.
Yeah.
Well, Misty, you and I have talked about this, and I think we've agreed that people do care once they have the information. It's not that people get the information on what's happened to Assange over the last 10 years and they just poo-poo it. It's just that it's not readily available information. The mainstream media isn't reporting on it. People have families, people have work. They, you know, just speaking for myself, I'm lucky to have the time to do the research and find out as much as I can what's going on. But I've found that when people get the information about what's happened to Julian, about what's happening to him, they do care, and they realize it for the absolute injustice that it is. So I get what you're saying.
I think I'm more talking about people who do know and know how fucked up this is and still aren't saying anything.
Right.
Those are the people I get the most frustrated with. Like like normies, like who have no idea what's going on in politics and they still think CNN is a valid news source and all of that. I don't necessarily blame those people, but the people on Twitter, the people that, especially people that follow like me or Steve, and they're still not making this a big deal and like talking about it. It's very frustrating to me that people don't understand how legitimately serious this is. So
Yeah.
those are the people I'm talking about.
I think that speaks to a few things. I think it speaks to the fact that they have to do research to sort of get to the bottom of what's going on, and research requires work, it requires time and effort, and let's face it, a lot of us are lazy nowadays. I'll speak for myself before anybody else, but it's also uncomfortable. It presents uncomfortable facts, and it puts the, maybe the status quo that they've come to find comfort in or come to think is going to be permanent. It puts that in jeopardy, and it shows you just how violent and repressive state apparatuses can be. And those aren't easy, comfortable, or even enjoyable things to deal with. So
like the story that comes to mind for me as you talk about that is the Khalid al-Masri statement that was read out in court. I hope I pronounced that right as Steve looks at the camera.
You didn't.
But it's literally the story, for those who don't know, of a guy on vacation in another country with his family that the CIA grabs, tortures, strips, rapes, flies to Afghanistan.
He was in Macedonia.
Yeah, he was in Macedonia, taken to the salt pits in Afghanistan. All the while they knew he was the wrong guy. And then held him until he did a 37-day hunger fast. They kept him knowing he was the wrong person for at least a month, if not longer than that. And then dropped him off basically not naked, but with the clothes that he had walking onto the airplane when they originally kidnapped him in Albania. And then he almost gets killed by Albanian security to somehow try to find his way back to Germany. His wife and kids had moved back to whatever country they were from. I can't remember off the top.
I think they were living in Germany, weren't they?
They were,
but I thought they had gone back to like Jordan or something like that.
Oh.
But if they'll do that to a random person, what would they do to someone that speaks out? And then people that are put in a position to either be afraid or be brave choose, well, hey, I'm going to talk about these 18 other topics, but not this one, because this one has the most uncomfortable truths.
Right.
That's something that I hope, as just a community of intellectual people that the internet is, that we can break out of that, because those dark truths are really what needs to come out right now.
Yeah, and look, I'm not going to pretend that my life is difficult. I'm not rolling in bank by any means, but I live a comfortable life, a comfortable working, maybe almost middle class life. And those are hard truths to confront, and they do keep you up at night if you actually care about what's happening. And it reminds me of this line in a T.S. Eliot poem. I forget which one it is, but the line is, after such something, what forgiveness? I'm bumbling this now, but anyway, I kind of like to paraphrase that, and it's after such knowledge, what forgiveness? And I think after such knowledge, as in once you know what's happening to Julian Assange, or once you've seen the collateral murder video, or once you've actually looked at accurate analyses of the death toll of Iraqi civilians in the war on Iraq, it's after such knowledge what forgetting? Like, how can you forget it? How can you push it out of your head? And maybe it's a pessimistic or a little bit self-flagellating, but I don't really know any other sort of mind frame or perspective to put it in. Once you know about this stuff, you can look away, but why would you want to be that type of person?
I always tell my husband the worst part about knowing is that once you know, you can't unknow. Like you just can't. You know it. It's now in your head, and I mean, like Jesse said, you can choose to look away and ignore it. But that I don't know how people do that. I don't know. I've not figured it out. I wish there are times I wish I could go back to the, 15, 20 years ago when I really didn't give a shit about politics. I didn't have any idea what was going on, and ignorance was bliss.
I was wrecked from like a preteen. And you just can't unring that bell. You can't.
Yeah,
I've tried.
It didn't. I didn't become genuinely politically aware until I was about 23, 24. And Misty and I did an interview last week with another show, and we were asked how we got into not activism, but being politically aware and speaking about this stuff and writing about this stuff. And for me, it was the Israeli war on Lebanon in 2006 that really catalyzed a political perspective for me, an anti-imperialist political perspective. So we all come to it at our own time. I think the hardest part is to stay with it and not look away, which is basically what I was trying to say, but I muddled it with T.S. Eliot.
That's funny.
I mean, that's on the ground, like passing out information about WikiLeaks and talking about Julian's situation. That's kind of a question that you get asked is like, why WikiLeaks? Like, why is that the thing that you're here talking about?
Right.
And it's something that, like, personally, that's one of the very few pieces of information I was exposed to that changed my mind in my like late teens, early 20s. It was literally loose change, collateral murder, and then everything that proceeded after that.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, to me as an individual, it takes so much not to just want to look away, which is, I think, the biggest struggle is there's, as I turn my head because there's noise, but as there's just so much other happenings in the world, trying to stay like centered on this certain topic in relation to it's really difficult sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And again, Misty and I have talked about this, that if you take an anti-imperialist stance, you're de facto taking an internationalist stance. And it's not that you're making them up, it's that you have to find the connections between what's happening to Julian Assange and the US's forever wars in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Syria, in Libya, US Special Forces, Green Berets down in Mali, in Africa, doing fuck knows what, assassinating people at will. It's all connected, and I'm not talking about that in some kind of Crash or Magnolia type of way, but
I went and got the background for it.
But
I did. Just for you guys.
But it is all connected, and I think that brings up a point. That brings up a big gap in the American polis, if you will, is that a lot of people don't see the connection between foreign policy and domestic policy. And not just domestic policy, but freedom of speech and other, supposedly inalienable rights. And then it's sort of like this circle, and that again speaks to the mainstream media, where most people get their information. And what foreign policy does the mainstream media cover anymore? What you never hear about Yemen, you never hear about, if you hear about Syria, it's about Trump and Putin. Never mind that Russia and Iran essentially removed jihadi psychopaths from that country, from overtaking that country. So I don't know what I'm trying to get at with all of this, other than
I think what you're trying to say is that we've talked about this so many times, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Jesse and I talk about this constantly. Everything is connected, and I've said this before on the show with Julian Assange. This is literally, it will influence every single other thing in the world, everywhere. I mean, climate change. If you want the climate action, the Julian Assange case is going to weigh heavily on that. If you want $15 an hour minimum wage, the Julian Assange case is going to weigh heavily on that. The destruction of investigative journalism and the First Amendment is going to influence every single other thing that we face. Like, it's all connected. All of this shit is connected. It really is. So, it's just getting people to realize that and recognize how important it is, I guess.
Yeah, and there's also this tendency too to not take people like Osama bin Laden at their word. When he was asked why he wanted to carry out jihad against the US, and again, I'm not going to conclusively say that bin Laden was behind 9/11, because I think there's a lot still to be examined there. I don't think he had nothing to do with it, but to pin it all on him and then take in the dubious circumstances surrounding his death, there are a lot of gaps there. But what he did say, I believe it was to the late Robert Fisk, was the main reason that Arabs and Muslims are wanting to wage jihad against Western forces is because of the illegal Israeli occupation of Palestine and the full-blown US support for it. And people have said to me, well, they're just using that as an excuse. All they really want is power. Well, I think both are true. They want power, but they also really are offended is not the right word. They're outraged by what they see happening to Palestinian Arabs and Palestinian citizens of Israel, this apartheid state that just keeps going and going because we give it $3.8 billion a year, basically without any kind of discretions. And you're not allowed to talk about that. And I think that's why WikiLeaks has been so important, because it's revealed the reasons behind why these things are happening, and it's brought up so many inconvenient truths, to quote Al Gore. So, and again, they're hard to deal with. People don't want to face that stuff, and I don't blame them. I wish they would, but it's just watching the collateral murder video alone. It's to think that that one incident has been repeated hundreds, maybe thousands of times in Iraq since then it's horrifying. And
well, and according to one of the people in the helicopter, that's something that happened every day.
yeah,
Like, that was a regular occurrence prior to that. It's just this time the film got out. I wanted to circle back for a second because you said something about when you become an anti-imperialist, you automatically become an internationalist. And I think that Americans in particular have a really difficult time wrapping their heads around community in general, but an international community or an international fellowship at all. It's not built into our collective national psyche. We're the people who go and defend the rest of the world from
Right.
forces of evil, but
Right.
we don't belong necessarily to an international community because we put ourselves above it. And as long as we view ourselves as this like separate, incredibly righteous moral determiner of the rest of the world's fate, as a citizenry, you know what I mean? Like not just the five of us here or whatever, but as a nation, and to actively pull back and go, wait a minute.
Well, I mean, that's American exceptionalism. Right there.
Yeah, well,
yeah, and Manifest Destiny and an international update to the Monroe Doctrine and all kinds of shit. It's no, you can have as big a community as you want. You can have an insular community in your immediate area and still be part of an international movement. It's 100% doable.
Yeah. But I know from talking to various people who call themselves conservatives, there's still this very strong strain of Buchananite isolationism and this sort of Alex Jones derived fear of a new world order if the US actually decides to abide by UN resolutions or join other international treaties. And it's very bizarre. I don't know quite where that comes from, but
it comes from reading Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030.
Like
That's
even
where
just the term international.
like reading the actual documentation is an exercise in how bad you would like to frighten yourself today.
Yeah, and if to just provide a little historical perspective, when the Nuremberg trials were taking place and Robert Jackson, who was the chief prosecutor for the US, spoke toward the end, he said that these laws that we're putting into place will mean nothing if even one of the parties who signs up to them doesn't abide by them. And the US hasn't abided by the Nuremberg laws or really any international law since the end of World War II, because it's been the dominant superpower. And then that goes to George Kennan, who spoke about, and Chomsky, for all his faults, has been really good on pointing this out, the need for the US to establish strategic dominance over not just territory, but resources. And that's what the US has done since. International law or humanitarian law be damned. And that's why we find ourselves, that's why we are where we are now.
Yeah, I mean, that's what WikiLeaks exposed with the Syria files, was literally that we wanted to build a fucking pipeline, and that we would do whatever the hell it takes to run a pipeline from one piece of water to another piece of water so boats didn't have to sail around Africa.
Right.
And everything that has happened there since then has just precipitated that illusion. Even as far as the false flags that were proven by that were covered up by the OPCW and then came out by the whistleblowers, when most everyone that had been paying attention already knew that those chemical weapons attacks in Duma were most likely staged to allow the U.S. to do their springtime attack in Syria.
Yeah, I think that's another story. A lot of really good independent journalists have covered that and exposed it for the fraud that it was. But it's still, that's another story that should be an international scandal. This was a hoax that allowed Donald Trump to fire missiles into Syria, almost like a mini Gulf of Tonkin event. And that should frighten people, that it's that easy for somebody who's in power to, decide, okay, well, this is true. I don't have any evidence. I've just heard, hearsay, etc. I haven't even let the OPCW investigate. I'm just deciding it's true, so we're going to fire these missiles. And I remember when that happened. That was on my birthday, actually, in 2018. And I remember listening on my phone to James Mattis, who I think he was defense secretary at the time, listening to him justify it. And it was just absurd. Again, end of empire activity.
Every time something like that happens, I wonder how many times does your government get to lie to you before your sense of skepticism kicks in? Like, how many times do they get to pull this shit before people start to question? And
all of them
supporting it.
For a lot of people, it's all of them.
Yeah, it's crazy though. That the psychology behind that level of brainwashing is fascinating to me. That you will just blindly go along with whatever the fuck these people say, despite the fact that they are proven liars. I mean, over and over and over again, they will lie. They lie their faces off
and demonstrate over and over and over that they don't give a fuck about you.
Yeah. And then you have people willing to go get in the streets and fight for Joe Biden and Donald Trump. What the fuck is wrong with you?
I was driving home from work. There were, I don't know, 10, maybe 12 people out at the one stop sign in our town. They were at the stop sign at that intersection. And I'm not making this up. I should have taken a picture. I really should have. There was a woman, had to have been in her 70s. She's holding up a sign, clearly homemade. All votes matter. Three exclamation marks. She got that, and it's people who are just out in the street demanding that every vote be counted because that's the narrative right now. Donald Trump doesn't want the vote count. Donald Trump wants to stop the election and blah, blah, blah. Joe Biden has a real chance of stealing Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin.
What I think is so fucking crazy is the inconsistency about how much people care about election integrity. When it's 2016 in California and there are hundreds of thousands of ballots that are going uncounted, Democrats couldn't have cared less. They did not give a shit. They allowed MSNBC to call that primary the day before it even happened. And nobody said a word. But now that it's Donald Trump and, there might be some ballots not being counted, all of a sudden they care so very much about election integrity. And that shit drives me crazy. Be fucking consistent.
That's never going to happen.
I know, but it just pisses me off, Steve. Let me rant about it.
Well, if they cared about election integrity, the WikiLeaks releases wouldn't have started Russiagate. It would have started criminal investigations into the DNC for money laundering and fraud.
Yeah, I think there should be an investigation into Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and Ukraine happening right now. And there are some independent journalists who have really softballed what happened there, and they've looked at the transcript between Trump and Zelensky, and they've said, well, yeah, there definitely was some quid pro quo. If you read that dialogue, there is no quid pro quo in that. I mean, if that's quid pro quo, then you need to brush up on your Latin. And I could name names, but I'm not going to do that. But it's... I don't know what it is. It's even the pathology. As somebody who's not a Trump supporter, and never will be. It's this pathology of even people who claim to be on the left or independent journalists to go along with certain narratives that you just have to read the document. You read a few
I don't know why
sentences.
it's controversial to think that Joe Biden should have to answer questions about the exchange of power for influence and money involving his son and a foreign power. I'm sorry, but if there's like
After he's on tape bragging about holding $1 billion over their fucking head for it. Like, straight up, I extorted these bastards. I threatened them, and they went and they listened to Joey B.
Yeah.
Like,
This is
bragging
not like
about
a tabloid rumor. There is, some basis to this, and he wants to be president of the fucking United States. He should have to answer questions about this. That shouldn't be a controversial statement to make. Like, if you're a consistent and logical human being, and you want to apply, just replace Joe and Hunter with Don and Don Jr., and all of a sudden the hypocrisy becomes crystal clear.
Yeah.
That was the craziest thing at the fucking Trump rally that I went to. You literally had BLM protesters and Biden supporters on one side of the street, Trump supporters on the other, and they're literally yelling back and forth at each other that the other person's candidate's a pedophile.
You're both right.
Right.
But your problem is you're only 50% right.
Mhm.
You walk around half right all day long, and 50% isn't a passing grade anywhere.
Yeah, and I think it's totally worthwhile and valid and necessary to call out these men for the sexual assault that they've been alleged to have committed. I mean, I say alleged, that's, I think, a little too nice. It seems like, to me, Tara Reade seems very believable, and I choose to believe the women first. And it's just, I don't understand how people can look past that. And I know several people, some of whom are in my family, who know about that, and they just are able to brush it off the canvas. And, they see, instead of Obama's face on the Change We Can Believe In poster, they see Joe Biden's geriatric mug with far gaze in the eyes. Like, it's a cult of personality that infects the politics as well, and that's something that doesn't get talked about much.
And it's a team sport mentality, because really that's really the basis of it. Because when you're like arguing over which pedophile is worse and which rapist is worse, you've lost the plot. Like, you have completely lost your mind. They both have credible accusations against them. And listen, when people accuse somebody who has a lot of power or influence, I want to believe survivors, but I also believe survivors with a healthy dose of skepticism. Right. And wanting to, flesh out the accusations. And because people do use those sorts of accusations against people who have power and influence, and it's very effective. I mean, they've done it with Julian. But you're right. Tara Reade is very believable. And what bothers me the most about what happened with Tara Reade is, if that had been Donald Trump, we've all seen it. They immediately believe, the accusers. They did the same thing with Kavanaugh. They immediately believed them. But then when Tara Reade comes around, they, do
what they always do.
Yes, they attack her character, and they trash her in the media, and they make her out to be this horrible person. And then you have people criticizing her for going on OANN to tell her story, when that's where the fuck else is she supposed to go? Are you kidding me? You're going to trash a survivor for going on and telling her story when, the person she's accusing wants to be president of the United States? That's newsworthy. That should be talked about. There should be an investigation. There should be like discussions about it. But instead, MSNBC and CNN brush it under the rug, won't talk about it. And the only place she can go is on, conservative shit media. So the inconsistency drives me crazy.
Kudos to Katie Halper, because I think she did one of the first interviews with Tara Reade, and I think that was very courageous of her and very principled. So anybody who's watching who hasn't watched that interview, I recommend it. It's
rough, but yeah, I recommend watching it.
It is rough. And seriously, though, Katie does deserve a lot of credit for that, because that was a very risky move for her, just career-wise. Because she runs in the circle she runs in, that was a pretty bold move on her part. I will give her credit for that, for sure.
Yeah. And I don't know why or how people are so easily able to sort of cast that aside and think that, well, Trump is not, or Biden is not Trump, so it's going to be better, even if he has these sexual crimes and war crimes in his past.
It's team sports, Jesse, just like Misty was saying. Like, okay, so he's a rapist, but he's our rapist. Okay, well, he's the okay kind of racist, because he's just that's just how people from his generation talk. He doesn't really mean. Look, he's got a black lady as his vice president. He can't be racist.
You guys.
He was the vice president when a black guy was president. He can't be racist by standing next to a black person in the eyes of a team player that erases all shadow of a doubt that they ever may be racist. Same with Donald Trump. Donald Trump goes and gets his picture taken with Kanye West, and like 18 million people on Twitter are like, he can't be a racist. Donald Trump is a green racist. Okay? He cares if you have money. If you have enough money to enter his orbit, you count to him. Doesn't matter what color you are. If you don't have enough money to enter his orbit, no matter what color you are, he doesn't give a fuck about you. And he never will.
I think it's also on top of people that play team sport.
You're breaking up hella bad on my end.
Yeah, he is.
Sorry.
You can't hear you, Andrew. It's too bad.
I don't know what happened.
I don't know.
Oh, your video's working now.
Am I there? Am I not there?
You're here now.
Okay. I was going to say, I think a larger portion of it's more learned helplessness, I think. It's the idea that, well, this one group didn't serve insert need for me, so I'm going to return to this other group that I think may serve insert need, instead of trying to find or join or create a solution for themselves. And I think that that's the whole problem with democracy in the way that we've been taught it. And it's not that it's necessarily a team mentality. It's that people give a portion of themselves, a portion of their personal power away, hoping that someone else will take care of this major issue for them, because that's how they've been taught it works.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, and I think that leads to a bigger, maybe an arguably more general question. Do we want this system, this supposed electoral system that we've been living under, to continue? Is this what we want? Is there any candidate who's going to bring substantial change to it? I don't see that happening. I think that's a pipe dream. And I'm not saying that we should go burn down the Capitol building. I'm just saying that it's a question we should seriously consider, because I think this is the end of whatever this stand-in for democracy is. This is what we get. This is what happens. And it's time to start thinking about alternative forms of organizing ourselves as communities. I won't pretend to have an answer or picture to what that means, but again, I think we have to ask ourselves that question. Do we want to keep going with this system?
Well, that's what I told somebody today on Twitter, that anybody who is still fighting or who still thinks that it is possible to reform this system is not fighting the same fight that I'm fighting. They're just not. And that's okay, I guess. But I'm not, there is no reforming this shit, you guys. It's too far gone. It's way too far gone. There is
Right.
no way we can reform this system into anything that is functional.
They rigged it for the people in 5th and like 23rd place.
Yeah. I mean, guys,
Because the person in 23rd place was coronated in the Hamptons 2 years ago.
Yeah, but seriously, like the fact that our system gave us Joe Biden and Donald Trump, you guys, that's fucking crazy talk. Like that's a failed system. We need
and
to.
Before that, it was Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton.
Yes.
And before that, it was Barack Obama and Mitt Romney, or Barack Obama and John fucking McCain.
These are the worst among us. Like these are the worst among us. There's what 350 million people in this country, and Joe Biden and Donald Trump is the best we have. Are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah.
When people say that within earshot of me anywhere, I'm like, no, that's not the best of what we can offer. That's the best that's being offered to us because we don't have a choice in this fucking matter and our votes don't count. And they're like, herder, I like Biden, or herder, I like Trump.
And they don't actually, though. They don't like Biden. They don't like Trump. They just convince themselves that they do because that's the only thing that they know. They think that they have no other choice. And so they have to make themselves okay with the fact that they like Biden or they like Trump. They're fooling themselves. It's a self-manipulation. It's ridiculous. And, trying to pretend like this system offers us anything at all is crazy. And your votes do not matter. I don't know how many times we have to see an election go this way or, see a primary get rigged before people realize that electoral politics ain't it. It ain't it.
Yeah, I don't even think you could call what the system we have electoral politics. I don't know what you call it. It's
John Pilger would call it a charade.
It's exactly what it is.
It's selectoral politics because they're selected for us. It's not, there is no voice for us.
Yeah. I mean, I remember before Joe Biden was nominated when he was
nominated.
Do you remember the other day, Missy, real quick, when we were discussing book titles, I think your title should be Selectoral Politics.
Mine?
Yeah.
It's a good term.
I like it.
I like it.
I like it. Oh, I came up with a new term.
You
Woo-hoo! Did. I feel pretty good about myself.
Do y'all remember in the months leading up to Joe Biden's, let's call it nomination, but selection, when he was just being put up against the wall for his dementia and the fact that still he can't form a complete sentence or a coherent thought, and then all of a sudden he's the nominee for vice president. How does that not set off alarm bells in your head? It's so obviously manufactured, and you could say the same thing about the Trump campaign as well. But with Biden, there are some differences between Trump and Biden, right? Biden was vice president under Obama when Libya was destroyed, turned into a failed state, and slavery was returned to the African continent under the first Black American president.
We're number one.
Biden met with Syrian jihadis. He met with Ukrainian neo-Nazis.
He met with the head of the ISI the day before 9/11.
I mean, this guy is atrocious. You look at his record. I encourage people to go to votesmart.com or other similar sites and look at how Joe Biden's voted throughout his political history, and you're not going to find anything nearly progressive or whatever you want to call it. but it's this sort of historical amnesia that so many people fall for. It's, like,
But he wears aviator sunglasses, Jesse.
like,
yeah, it's
Lydia-
not even the historical
Lydia-
amnesia. It's the immediate rewriting of history in fucking real time by a media that is part of the reason everything sucks right now.
yeah,
You know, if it was just collective national amnesia, enough people would snap out of it. And because it's been just, we've been pummeled with how illegitimate and broken and, well, not broken, but corrupt by design this entire system is. It's rubbed in our faces basically every single day, especially during election season.
mhm.
And yet we are so heavily propagandized and we are siloed so hard on social media that that everybody's in a fucking echo chamber or fighting over which team's propaganda should be believed.
Right. And that goes back to the fact that if you're criticizing Trump, for example, the majority of the criticism doesn't have to do with his policies. It's ad hominem or personality attacks or palace intrigue. It's not the fact that if you look even at a Bellingcat map of Syria, you can see that the only US positions that are left in there are guarding and occupying the oil fields of Syria. It's not that he's increased sanctions on Russia or imposed the Caesar Act on Syria while it's trying to rebuild itself from this horrific war that the US is largely responsible for. It's about his hair color, or Melania had something on the back of her jacket when she walked up the plane to go to wherever. It's again, as I said, I think it's a disrespect to kabuki theater to even call it that. I don't know what you call it. It's Baudrillard would have a field day with it.
It's similar to the way that the English represent the royal family.
Yeah.
To where there's the good parts and the bad parts, but there's no policy. There is personalities, and the personalities you like and don't like. There isn't talk about the abject failure of the system for hundreds of years underneath English rule.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that same level just brought to the United States, but in a way that is reality television, to where you love to hate the bad guy because for some people it's what gives you clicks, and for others it's what gives you a dopamine hit just by the way that social media has taught you how to interact with the world.
Yeah, and I think back, just what you were saying, I think back to, was it 2017 when Trump launched his first airstrike on Syria, and Brian Williams was, he quoted Leonard Cohen, of all people, to describe the glory of these missiles being fired into a sovereign country that we're not at war with, yet we're illegally occupying. And if you can't look at that and see sort of but the end of empire, the like absurdity of the human condition, then I don't know what's going to convince you. But I think those are things we have to look at, how perverted, not just the American politics has become, but also the media. If you don't look at that, nothing's gonna change. You can watch Chris Hayes all you want and think he's doing a noble job or a good job, but he's a propagandist, and all of these media personalities are: Brian Williams, Sean Hannity, Anderson Cooper, and we have to get past these people as sort of being like the gatekeepers or like teachers of what we should and should not think. And I think that's a part of the larger sort of I don't want to say mission because that's too like militaristic, but what we've been talking about as far as getting away from all of this propaganda and imperialism and trying to create a society that is not based on that doesn't rely on that. Because essentially that's what the US relies on now. There's no manufacturing base left in the US besides arms manufacturing. And that should terrify everybody.
Yeah, and the fact that we only have, a handful of companies controlling basically all of our media. I mean, everything from TV to newspapers to magazines to movies to, the advertisements you see or hear on the TV or radio, like everything is controlled by the same fuckwads. And they all have an agenda. They all have basically the same agenda to screw us over and enrich themselves further. So, that should be a problem for people. I don't know why that hasn't been a bigger story over the past, 40 years of the consolidation of power in media. That's a huge problem, you guys. Like, I don't understand what it's going to take for people to recognize the fact that having a couple of people in charge of all of your information and everything that you're allowed to know, and they've been setting this up for a long time. You have, was it Chris Cuomo, that you shouldn't read the WikiLeaks, you should just get your information from us.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what they want you to think, that they're the arbiters of all knowledge, and you shouldn't look into anything for yourself. Don't think for yourself. We will give you the information we think that you should have and tell you what to think about it. And that's fucking terrifying. Crazy.
Who would want anything from Chris Cuomo?
Right?
Yeah.
Fredo.
Yeah, Fredo. Yeah, that was a ridiculous incident, but I think it adds to what we're talking about. These are symptoms, these are pieces of evidence of the collapse of this empire. You have people like Chris Cuomo who are considered journalists, and has that guy ever reported from a war?
I'm pretty sure Chris Cuomo's own mother doesn't consider him a journalist.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure. We've got about 8 minutes to
we gotta wrap
wrap. Josh has another stream he's got to set up and run for our good friend Alex Hills, who will be streaming a live talk from Nikki Hager. So check that out. It'll be around 8:30 Pacific, 11:30 on the East Coast. Jesse, I would love to get some final thoughts from you, and please tell everyone where they can find you.
Sure. Well,
and thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on. Before I do the social media plug, I just want to bring up real quickly the statement that the German journalist John Goetz recently gave in defense of Julian Assange. And there are a lot of details there. I don't think we have time to go into it, but
yeah, we're gonna have to do that Saturday.
Yeah, everybody should check that out. However they might be able to access it, but
we've got links in the description.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think everybody should check that out. There's a ton of information in there about the measures that WikiLeaks has taken to keep certain sources and certain people safe, to really do their due diligence before publishing information. And there's also a lot of information in there about Khalid al-Masri, whom we mentioned earlier. There's the German-ordered bombing of Kunduz in Afghanistan, which I don't think a lot of people know about. There's also a reference to Task Force 373, I believe, which was an American assassination task force in Afghanistan. So there's a ton of really good information that John Goetz, who was formerly with Der Spiegel, provides in his statement. And all of this, of course, you can read on WikiLeaks as well. So I encourage people to do that. And we didn't get to talk about the new Mueller remix, but maybe we can save that for another episode. So anyway, thank you all for having me on. And again, as you said in the introduction, Misty and I, we co-host a podcast called Facts on the Ground. You can find us on Twitter. It's at FOTG Podcast. And there's a link on that profile to our YouTube channel. And we just did an episode with Moss Robeson, who's been doing some really good work on Ukrainian nationalists in the US and their connections to both the Biden and Trump campaigns. We also just did an interview with Kevin Gostola about Julian Assange and things related to that. So definitely check us out there. If you can, give us a follow, subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. And you can find me on Twitter if you're interested at Jesse Zurawell. It's JESSEZURAWELL.
But he's only on Twitter like 5 seconds a week. So.
Well, it was 4 seconds last time, so at least I gained a second.
Yeah. So I'm just saying, like, if you follow him, don't expect much. He's not a Twitter guy.
One thing I want to say is a thank you to everybody who's followed me, who's followed Misty, who's followed us, who's followed our show account, who's followed our YouTube channel. It's much appreciated. I'm not a big social media guy, but I do pay attention to both the good and the bad responses that come in, and I actually appreciate all of them. I think
even the weird ones.
I think digital dialectics is important. So thank you everybody who's been watching and subscribing and paying attention to what we're trying to put out there. And I also encourage you to watch this show and Slow News Day show because they're the shit, and that's it.
My name's Andrew. You can follow me on Twitter at Andrew Zigman. I just want to say thank you, Jesse, for coming on. I really appreciated hanging out with you. It was really cool getting able to chat.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say, if you wanted to follow us, you can find us on Twitter at action_4Assange or actionforassange.com. Don't forget that the 5th of November is tomorrow or in a few hours. Find your local or be your local Million Masked March. And as always, be the decentralized action, be the noise in your community, the posters, the flyers, the media for Julian.
And I am Misty Winston. You can find me on Twitter at Sarcasm Stardust. And like Jesse said, you can find our show, Facts on the Ground, on YouTube, and then also on Twitter as well. I think I have links to all that stuff on my Twitter bio. So if anybody's interested, you can check that stuff out there. But yeah, thanks, Jesse, for coming on. And
it was a pleasure.
Sorry that we're a little short today, and so we didn't get into some of the stuff that we were going to. But
no, that's okay. I think it was a.
We won't chat again, you know. So yeah, and then thanks to my co-host, and thanks to Sleepy Josh, and always thank you to everybody in the chat. I love you guys.
Thank you, Josh.
My name's Steve Poikin, and I host a show called Slow News Day, which you should be watching on the Rockfin. But I do have a YouTube channel, and you can check that out as well. I'm also on DLive and Library. Glory Jones, the amazing and wonderful and talented Glory Jones, co-hosts the show with me. Tomorrow. That's right. Tomorrow's Thursday. Robbie Yeager will be on with us. It is always a good time with researcher, deep diver extraordinaire. Sunday, Juan Passarelli and Vanessa Beeley will be with me in Glory, and that will be fun. The hit piece that the BBC4 has done on Vanessa started airing this week, so we're probably going to get into that a little bit. I would definitely look for that. Thank you, Jesse, very much. This was a lot of fun, man.
Thank you so much, Steve.
I enjoy chopping it up with you. I do.
Absolutely.
And thanks to my co-hosts and to Sleepy Josh on the 1s and 2s and for emergency graphics. Yeah, thank you guys in the chat. We love you. We do. We'll see you. Hopefully I'll see you all tomorrow, but if not, we'll see you Saturday. Good luck to us all.